Hello, my friends, family, and dear colleagues. It is obvious that our health is not really affected negatively by animal fats, but it is badly affected what we are being told with sugars. Now, when this is mentioned, then experts like Dr. Mercola, Joseph Mercola, and Joel and all the other experts on internet are highly prized and followed by public, are putting blame on fructose. Yeah, it's high fructose corn syrup. That's the problem. Well, you look at the other type of lunatics, the alternative, basically pro vegetable guys. Well, I believe that Eva Merkel is there. But those who claim that dairy are bad for us, so right away goes, well, yeah, milk has a sugar. Okay, it's a lactose. Okay, so we have now here mentioned three different types of sugar already. We have the fructose, we have lactose, and we have glucose, or starch. Well, there is a question about what is the best edulcorant, what to use to sweeten things up. Well, you will for sure not sweeten them with glucose because glucose is not sweet. It's a starch. So you are going to use something that is sweet, so fructose. Now people say, well, still, how about honey? Then when you look at the specs to check what honey is made, again it's glucose. How can it be glucose when it's sweet as hell? Glucose is not sweet. And where does honey come from? It comes from the offering of plant, but it offers it through sweetness. Now, sweetness comes from fructose. As I have mentioned before, glucose is by design shielded from animals. So you are not going to find it in its natural form, easily available and absorbable, because it is going to be a problem for animals. So whenever sweet stuff comes out of plant, if we are talking about maple syrup, if you are talking about sugarcane syrup, this is all fructose. There's no starch in it. It's fructose. It's there to attract animal. Purpose is to spread the seed, usually, or in type of flowers like we have here, even the orchideas, but also these tube-like flowers that attract hummingbirds. What is there? It's a fructose. It's not glucose. Attract the birds so they pollinate. We cannot trust anything that is written anywhere because it is all manipulated to mislead us. Now what is this big deal? Why is the fructose being blamed for problems in the body, the sweet stuff? Because fructose is created in such a way that it does not affect the health of animals. It does not affect the health of animals. Otherwise, hummingbirds would be dead. Otherwise, bears would be dead when they eat honey. So, why is fructose being blamed? Because we know that when it is absorbed, and it can be absorbed in a body. Why? Because we have a GLUT, and GLUT is transporting mechanism for sugar, any kind of a sugar. We made up stories. Oh, GLUT2, GLUT4, this is for this is for that. Pow! When we know very well that GLUT, any kind of a GLUT, will transport any kind of a sugar. So, because we do have sugar transporting mechanism, so we don't have to use insulin to get sugar into the cell, because the small amounts of sugar that cell needs, transporter can supply. And even though sugar will be glucose or fructose can be absorbed into the blood. But then the cells do not request it because they cannot use it. So fructose basically will have to be then processed in the liver, and it turns into fat. And side product, yes, is uric acid. But uric acid is not problematic. We are meant to have certain level of uric acid. We are so much hang on antioxidants. Well, this is your number one and the best and strongest antioxidant there is. You don't need any other. So the problem becomes when the uric acid level grows. So now they go, ah, yeah, but you see the high fructose corn syrup brings a lot of fructose. Well, it cannot bring more fructose into the body than there is a transporting mechanism. And GLUT does not increase when we eat a lot of fruits or honey. GLUT increases when we eat starch, non-sweet stuff, potatoes, rice, grain. This is when we are increasing the amount of transporters. Why? Because this is a type of sugar that our cells can use. So they'll try to load it up. And as the whole nature is being programmed, the better supply, the more supply, the more growth. So you bring more glucose, you will have creation of more transporter. And then as you have more transporter GLUT, then more fructose will be captured and more fructose will be put in the body. So you produce more fat and you produce more uric acid. But again, uric acid is not a problem if you are well hydrated, because as we know, body is a robot that has programs, sensors, and switches. So as soon as uric acid level increases over the radar, over what should be normal, it becomes eliminated through urine. Not a big deal, but it becomes a big deal if you are dehydrated, if you don't have enough plasma, if you have thick blood because plasma is missing, then there is no water, so it cannot be eliminated. So we have now here two different problems where fructose can cause problem. Two different scenarios. One is higher absorption, and the other one is lack of water in the blood. Now, where does lactose come in? Because now we have these freaks, anti-dairy freaks, who say that no, milk is no good. And as you get older, when you don't need anymore, you need the milk when you're a baby. That's your basic food. But as you start eating, your affinity to milk and dairy is dropping. It's the same bull as they are telling us that, collagen is being produced less as you get older. Well, you're not growing anymore. Of course it's produced less, unless you start bodybuilding, and then you're getting more muscles, and then you need also more connective tissue. And then it's going to be building up and growing up again. But what's this stuff with lactose? How come that many people are become lactose intolerant? What does it mean, lactose intolerant? Well, it means that these people do not produce enzyme called lactase. Now, why is this enzyme lactase necessary if lactose can just be absorbed with the glute? Well, it really can't, because the purpose of lactose is not to be absorbed. The purpose of lactose, and this is why it is in the milk, is to create a fiber so the stool can be formed while animal is only drinking liquids. So babies or mammals, when they are babies, they only drink milk. But their stool is not watery. The stool is pasty, as it should be. Now, what is creating this paste? Fiber. Where does the fiber come from? From lactose. Because body produces enzyme lactase, which then turns lactose into complex sugar, something like carbohydrate, fiber. And these fibers of lactose then makes the stool pasty. So it's not there to be absorbed and to nourish. It is there to allow intestines to work properly. Now, how come that some people lose the ability of producing lactase and then they become lactose intolerant because it cannot be turned into the paste, so body rejects it and gives you diarrhea? So why? This happens only to people who in general are getting allergies. Now, why are they getting allergies? Because they do not consume enough minerals. They usually keep away from salt. Remember, this is the schooled, smart generation, because we think what we are being told in school with these scientific studies in these scientific books, that this is true, this is scientifically proven. It's scientific lie. Same like global warming. It's all lie. So, if your knowledge comes from school books, it's worth nothing. We are being misled. If you start munching on vegetables, you are creating completely different environment in your gut. Since you do not have digestive enzyme for this, bacteria start growing, which breaks down the food for you. It doesn't break it down to feed you. It breaks it down because it thrives on that stuff. And then some of that decay you can use. Some of the bacteria, what they produce is oils and fats you can use, but in general, it's all inflaming your gut, little by little, and leads to a terrible digestive problems. More veggies you eat, more of problems you can expect. Less salt you take, less plasma you will have in the blood, which means no cleansing, so your blood becomes toxic, which creates shutting down the cells, then becoming dehydrated and acidic, not being able to wash themselves, and here comes your allergy. I think that, as far as I know, everyone who had allergies or who was lactose intolerant, they very quickly snapped out of it as soon as they started following the self-healers protocol. With lactose, it is so fast that within 10 days, most people can start eating cheese and start drinking milk. We just had a client here with us for a week. She also loved cheeses, but she could not have them. She became intolerant. And she was pleasantly surprised how quickly she recovered from this. And here she was eating, well, she started hydration and the protocol earlier, before she came here. So when she came here, well, we gave a test. Little yogurt, give her a banana shake with yogurt, bananas, and eggs. And she felt good. So we gave her cheese. Oh, she was reborn because she loved cheeses and could not have them for years because she was intolerant. Well, you are intolerant when you have a wrong flora in your gut. And no probiotics will ever help you. It's a bogus science. Same like everything we are told about sugars. We're always being told, sugar, you know, the white stuff. The corn syrup, you know, the sweet stuff. The sweet stuff is not a problem. Problem is starch, the sticky stuff. And the starch, we know our cells can use it. And this is why there is a mechanism to work with it. But then we say, well, you see, all this rheumatism, this is all because of this uric acid. and uric acid is there because of fructose. Not true. Because the same as fructose that cannot be, cells refuse to take in, they cannot manipulate it, so it ends up being in liver, flipped to a fat. But the same thing happens with glucose. I have explained that if you eat small amount of it, then the absorption goes in, cells can use it, turn it into energy, but then they get reprogrammed. But still, they can use it. But who eats like Chinese? Little bit of rice and then meat. They eat all kind of meat. We make fun of them. Well, they eat bat. Well, bat is meat. And if this is what is the only source, if you cannot afford to have a pork or chicken or beef, well, you eat whatever you can find. But again, we are being told this sugar, sweet stuff. Sweet stuff is not a problem if there would not be a starch involved. And table sugar, the sweet stuff, is about 60–70% of starch and 30–40%, depends, of fructose. Corn syrup, similar, close to 50–50. So that's a big amount of fructose, but huge amount of starch. And the starch creates the increased absorption of sugar transporters, which then bring in much larger amount of fructose than normally body would take if we would not eat starches. And then again, the same thing happened with the glucose, because if you eat a big bowl of rice and you can only use a small amount of it for instant fueling, charging of your cells, well, what is going to be happening with the rest of that bulk of glucose that you have absorbed? Well, how much you absorb, you never absorb whole what you eat. You absorb part of it because it depends, again, on your transporting mechanism. But frequently eating glucose, we start absorbing more and more because the robot, again, abundance, becomes abundant amount of glucose, so body starts making more and more GLUT transporters, so it can bring it in. At the same time, it brings in also fructose. So then the fruit becomes problem. But becomes problem not because of fructose in particular. Overall, sugar, since it cannot be stored in our cells, we don't have anywhere where to store it. We don't have potatoes, we don't have jam, we don't have nothing growing in our body of that kind, of that sort. So since we cannot store it and it comes in large quantities, then liver will flip it into fat. We get fatty liver not because of fructose, we get fatty liver because of glucose. We receive way more glucose than we ever receive fructose. And no matter how many fruits you eat daily, you are not going to increase the absorption of sugars, so you will never ever get diabetes from eating fruits. But once when you have diabetes, once when your sugar absorption is so high that sugar jumps uncontrollably, then the same thing can happen from fruits, because The only way it can happen if you increase dramatically the availability of sugar transporting protein, GLUT. People are very often asking me, Darko, well, yogurt, it also has a sugar. Yeah, it has lactose. Don't worry about it. Unfortunately, yes, the blood sugar is going to jump up a little bit, but a little bit, tiny bit, only because you have huge amount of GLUT. This availability of GLUT then lets you absorb the sugar. So some people can have one slice of bread and sugar skyrockets. And some people can have the whole cake and sugar stays low, just slight increase, because they don't have transporter. We gotta know the truth. It's not because it's available, it's going to be absorbed. Oh. This is why some people get skinny and they eat like crazy, and they eat starches, of course, because they're not absorbing sugar. GLUT levels are low. And again, it's the frequency. The more often, because there's a limited amount of transporter. So if you eat once a day, so only once a day you are going to have this availability of glucose, but then for a long period of time there is none. So mitochondria have to stay active. There is not so much sugar coming, it's only once a day. And since you can absorb only limited amount, okay. But if you start munching, and in between meals, and 3-4 meals, and in between you're munching, well, now you have every 15 minutes, every 20 minutes, you have a bit of glucose coming in. So the body, something is available regularly all the time, body is getting the mechanism going for this kind of a fuel. This is the problem. Stop snacking. But as far as sugars goes, there is only one problematic sugar for all animals. And this is why in Bible they call it the forbidden fruit. But it's not fructose, it's not fruit. It is starch. And this is the only problematic because our body produces it. Our body uses it to create amino acids, to create proteins. It needs the carboxylic group. So, don't blame the sweet stuff for problems. It is contrary. It is what Dr. Mercola and other experts are calling the safe starch, safe sugar. Nothing safe about it, because the body is programmed to use it and process it, does not make it safe. Because it is not meant to come through food, it is meant to be produced by our cells from fat. And there are only 3 places where glucose is being produced. It is being produced inside of a muscle cell, inside of a brain cell, and inside of a liver cell. And only liver has the mechanism to release it into the blood. The muscle and the brain they use it for their own purpose. So they cannot inject it into the blood. And whenever we use some of it, it's in a form of glycogen. Whenever we use some of it because of some stress, then during the night, the cell is going to rebuild it. But it is not going to be rebuilding it from what we are being told. You eat carbohydrate, you eat starch, and then some of it turns into glycogen. This is nonsense. Because most of this rebuilding is happening at night when we are sleeping. And you are not eating, so you cannot use that sugar. It is all being done from fat. The same as cell can convert starch into fat, it can convert fat into starch. You can turn wheel one way and you can turn wheel the other way. So, this is as much as we should know about sugars. Can you use sweeteners? Yes, make sure they don't have starch. They can have as much fructose as you want, no starch. Okay, and they will not have starch if they come from natural product that it's available without being processed. And the most obvious is nectar. Nectar is fructose being released into a flower so that it attracts bees, attracts hummingbirds to feed on it, at the same time pollinating. And then bees pick it up. So how can all of a sudden honey be basically a starch, glucose, if all honey picked up was nectar, which is pure fructose, very sweet. But you look in literature, you look at studies, no, honey has I don't know how much percentage of glucose. Bull. It just cannot be. Just think, use your brain, think rationally. Forbidden fruit is always being sheltered from access to animal through wrapping of cellulose. So it cannot be absorbed. Unless you break the cellulose through grinding or heating it up. That's the only way. So don't worry about sweeteners. If you want to sweeten stuff up, natural stuff. Sugarcane syrup, maple syrup, honey. Those are natural sweeteners. Forget about stevia because this is not coming in a quantities that you can use, and it's amino acid based, and I observed that it does harm kidneys. So do not use stevia. Thank you for listening. I hope this makes sense to you. Just do your research. Thank you for being here. Love you all.